Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I should have a New York accent, I'm listening to Michael Savage, and Michael's been around for years. Back in the '70s, maybe late '70s, I got a job with Laird Siegler. I was a defense contractor, making very good money, and of all things, I was working up in Fort Ord when I was still there, Fritchie Army Airfield. So I'd go over to the other airfields, which was Hollister. It used to be an airfield there, and I see a P-51 flying around, and go over there and ask about it. It turns out to be the pilot's an anesthesiologist in San Francisco. And so for $250, I paid for the gas and oil for about 20 minutes, and then I got a ride. I got a ride in the back seat, P-51. How about that? Anyway, I used to listen to Michael Savage, and I had the best of the best because on the other side of the coin was a guy named Alan Watts. Alan has passed on over to wherever those kind of people think you go. Maybe you don't go. You're absorbed by the universe. Anyway, very philosophical, Eastern philosophy. He'd been there, done that, lived out there, and a very adroit speaker, as Michael is also. And I'm not sure they even knew each other or knew about one another. But Michael Savage was what conservatives needed at the time because he was just kicking royal ass over there in San Francisco. But Alan Watts was interesting to listen to. So, well, since the '70s, what now, 45, 55, I've been listening to most interesting people in the world. If you're choosy, you listen to if they're going to be over 15 minutes, if they can't make the point or make a point, then I move on. I don't brook fools easily. Except I don't forget this, that God has chosen uh, the uninformed to enlighten the wise. Now, I don't know why God happened to pick me, but the scriptures are full of information about having one day come to Moses. One day, Jeremiah. One day, God apparently, by your own scriptures, picks people. Picks people that he wants to use. And if you're staying up in the game and you love the Lord Jesus Christ, a little baby away in a manger somewhere, that's fine. But nowadays we're getting into the latter days, and knowledge shall be increased. Well, we have a whole science of what knowledge is. What kind of knowledge is there? Are you going to be a famed archaeologist? Are you going to be a brain surgeon? Are you going to be a fine pilot, like the guy that dropped it in the Manhattan over there with that didn't lose anybody on there? Anyway, life sometimes chooses your path. I say you're like traveling down a freeway at about 75, and something used to tell me, get off the freeway, get off this freeway. So I used to have the habit of, well, no matter what was happening, I'd pull off the next on ramp, go down to the bottom, sit for a minute, nothing happened. Had to pee or something like that, or grab a cup of coffee, and I got back on the freeway. When they had an earthquake in Northridge, California, very bad. That was one of our worst. A police officer got up that morning, put on his uniform, sidearm, prepared his motor cop, and he got on the motor cop and he took off for work as usual. And there wasn't a bridge there that morning. If you've been involved in law enforcement, the last words on a young officer's lips are, "Oh shit." Doesn't matter if they got shot, if they got outdrawn, outmaneuvered, or they shouldn't have been at that place at that time. So, anyway, I had a time of listening to Michael Savage. He's still on. He makes good sense, except he's lacking a little tiny bit in spiritual values because I guess God hasn't chosen him. Anyway, there's one thing about what's going on nowadays is Russia is supposed to be the bad guys. Russia is supposed to be the one from the north that will come down and they will attack Israel, the one that has no gates, the ones that the doorways are not locked. And that would be fine, except probably in the 1800s, there was something called British Israelism, and the British tried to explain why this small island country with a large navy, and they were taking over the world. They were, you know, and they were besting the French. They were besting most of Europe, took over India, and there's nothing more interesting than British history. Nowadays, we have access to the history of China, Russia, Africa, South Africa, Australia. And if you look enough, I was involved in something called the World Affairs Council for a while. A nice lady. She was related to the Norton bomb sight designer, and her husband was a well-known pilot. And I was sort of getting into being drawn into this thing of studying the Bible, reading the Bible, meeting certain people that had certain information, take it or leave it. Anyway, I was meeting people just at a bar or at lunch or in this World Affairs Council, and I would meet people that were well known, that were involved in world politics. So when I had extra money, in those days you could just get on an aircraft. There was no strip searching or anything like that. You just get on the aircraft, buy a ticket, and go. And that's what I did. I met a Dutch kid, Jewish kid. Kruger was his last name. He liked to do this also. Now, he was a law school graduate. He was an attorney, but not in every state. And of course, not in every country. But when he traveled, he'd check in with a local law office, and he was good at research. And most attorneys aren't. So he'd process the whole thing by, you give me such and such a money, and I'll go ahead and put this case together for you. He's very good. Now, he didn't like me to begin with because I was a fledgling paralegal, and I'd gotten into a situation where I found an attorney. I found a government program that would pay me, a Vietnam vet, would pay me $10,000 a year, 1 year, $10,000 to become a paralegal. So, but when I went down there to collect my monthly pittance or weekly, it wasn't bad in those days. $420 every 2 weeks. I could live on it and drink on it. Anyway, I went down, and there was a kid from the Philippines, PI, Philippine Islands. I spoke a little Tagalog, which is their local language. And he said, "Hey, we got a program here. You want to be a paralegal, private detective?" Da 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 da. I said, "I don't know. Where did you see this?" And he pulls a book off the counter there, and it's called the California Vocational Guide. And he went down and said, "What do you want to be, a paralegal? You want to be an investigator, a staff investigator?" Da da. And I said, "Well, this paralegal sounds interesting." And he says, "Fine." So in those days, we didn't have as much computerization. So he calls on the phone. Remember that? The phone. He called on the phone back to Houston. And the guy says, "Yes, we do have that money available. There's $800 million for vets, but we don't have, nobody wrote the program yet." So he said to me, I said, "I used to write those programs when I was in special operations." Somebody had to write them, because anyway, it didn't give you any sense of sovereignty or being if you had gotten involved in what was actually going on. So that's where so I wrote him up a program, and they bought it. And so we get $10,000, so much a week, which turned out to be, in those days, I think it was going to be $7 a week, $7 an hour. But I had to use it up in 1 year. So I found an attorney near Palos Verdes, and I said, "Look, I got a program here that you pay me $14 an hour," which wasn't bad in those days, especially tax-free, as this program was. "And I'll pay you, the government will pay you $7 back, and you'll get a discount." He says, "You're not an attorney now, are you?" He said, No. So I went to work for a guy named Bill Robertson, very interesting attorney. His wife was Swiss, and they lived in a home in Palos Verdes. And it used to be Billy Graham's home, I think. I'm not sure. So I got that, and then I said, "Well, look, I got an apartment right down the street, but we're going to use that as what we call an annex. We'll keep all of our law material and our files down there. That way, I got to take the rent off, or Bill paid the rent." So that was a good deal to go, also. And they were just getting into computers, these big 4 feet by 6 feet kind of computers. So nobody knew much about that except for the computer people, and they were busy, always busy. So that put me around all of that kind of an environment. So with all that, I had time to listen to people on the radio, ministers, pastors, and this concept of the Israel was not to be attacked by Russia, because Israel as a country, there were hardly any Jews left. Those Jews had come from Sino-Soviet Russia, and they were called Cossacks, and they were 3 books were written. I think I mentioned this once before. 3 books were mentioned. James Birmingham, I think his name was. It was called Our Gang, and that was about the Jewish families coming to the United States when they did. Another book by somebody else was called Real Lace, and that was the Irish families, like the Kennedys, how they came to the United States. And then if you got the English, you've got several more. And then finally, we got the other Jews. They were called the rest of us. So they wrote another book. Hey, this is the rest of us coming to the United States. So you get a pretty good idea about people. And of course, everybody I'd meet, if I knew this information, it would sound very interesting to them. But this information concerned themselves with the British were the real Israelites that came to America. And Manasseh was involved. So it takes the British, this British Anglo-Saxon Federation, really a small little groups that were held back. And so I used to go out and visit these people. So the Lord was supposed to have been with his uncle, Joseph of Arimathea, and most historians agree, in a way, that he was in Glastonbury in the west of England during his teenage ages. So it always makes it interesting. You don't know how Christ went through teenage because he was hit with every kind of a desire that most young boys have. And you can rest assured that Satan supplied some nice looking little English girl that just had her mind made up that she was going to attract this young man from the Middle East. Anyway, there's so much to it. And then out of the World Affairs Council, I met two men from Australia, and they were part of the educational system that had to do with audio visual. So I picked them up one day, and I said, well, let's go down to Los Angeles City school system and see what they have. And I said, hey, man, that'd be very appreciative. So we went down there, and they went back there, and they showed them the facilities, and I sat outside, but outside there were these large 33 1/3 records, and they were just a sampling. Anyway, they had one called Wind in the Willows. Wind in the Willows. And part of that, you've heard of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at Disneyland and Disney World. That's part of Wind in the Willows, about the creatures that lived in the countryside. And there was one called the River Rat Meets the Seagoing Rat, Chapter 9. And this was very interesting because it gave a lot of information historically of how the seagoing rat had traveled with Sigurd when he went down, the Viking went down the Dnieper River, and they supplied some of the royal guard for Constantinople and onward into France and here and there. Anyway, that got me ticking about, well, some of this might be true. So, anyway, the concept is that what's not being told nowadays, and I guess we're supposed to know it, is, the Jews, by their own, look up the Jewish Encyclopedia, the Jews have never amounted to more than 13 million people. They just never have. And they admit it. And if they really lost 6 million during the Holocaust, then by 1948 they were back up to 13 million again. Where in the hell did all these millions of people suddenly appear from? Well, the Bronx, I guess. We know a lot of Jewish people came here and that they were paid for to be here. It's a great thing, kind of situation. But it's such a horrific idea that if America and Britain are the real Israel, then who is going to be attacked from the north? Recently, I don't think it's going to be the Russians, because where did the gospel go? Christ himself said on the day of Pentecost, go not unto the cities of the Samaritans. Go not here, go not to there, don't darken their doorstep. Go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's going to give you, it's going to leave you with a real dilemma. If Israel is going to be attacked, from the north, then wouldn't they be wiped out instantaneously by these hordes from the north, by the Chinese? Anyway, I've got to straighten out some of this kind of stuff, and I've decided that God has told me, you concentrate on AI. When you talk about the book of Revelation in chapter 13, chapter 12, 11, about these beasts, I found a movie. I found a book, an audio book called The Agent of Chaos. And this concerns that the United States and Britain and all the moneyed guys, all these guys they call the higher ups, the elites, that they've gotten together and now they've decided they better get on top of this thing because AI is going to be bigger than you'd ever think. Anyway, so I read the book, and the book comes out that there had been a New Zealander billionaire that had already set up a research facility, and where of all places but in Cuba. It had all been quieted down, and they were going to work on this, and then he was going to decide on who he was going to sell this AI program to, China or Russia. So the CIA and everybody else jumps on board, and they stop this. But a lot of them didn't know what the hell AI was all about to begin with. That book ends with them killing the guy, and they destroyed the computer, which was called Casus, and they destroyed the computer just before it was going to take over. Now that reminded me, I said, there was a movie once, and I remember it, and I've been having a hard time remembering it. It was called Colossus. I thought it was the Forbin Project, but no, it turned out to be Colossus, the Forbidden Process. And this is about the same thing. So you younger people, you have the Terminator, where Skynet becomes self-aware. Skynet knows not the best thing for him or it to have human beings around. And Colossus, he hooks up, they turn him on, and he said, there's another system. What do you mean? Yeah, the Russians have Guardian. Anyway, before you can know it, that Guardian and Colossus have teamed up, doing a fine job of taking over. There's not a damn. The movie leaves you with the idea that this is going to happen. You're not going to own anything. You're not going to control anything, and you're going to love it. Anyway, if you can find that movie, I got a nice copy, remastered, beautiful copy on eBay. It's called Colossus, the Forbin Project. See if you can get a copy of it, and then always hang on to all your Terminators, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then there's the War Games, and I looked it up on the Wikipedia. Movie-wise, there's about 210 different computers that were supposed to have taken over the world, and all these movies that have been made. I'm going to leave you with that right now, but I've started making these short videos, and I've actually got some pretty good response out of people that I didn't even know are still out there. I used to work for a colonel, Chuck Darnell. Now, I thought Chuck had passed away a long time ago, and he came back and he said, I liked your video, the second one. Anyway, let's stick together on this kind of a thing is remembering that the Russians are not who you think they are, and we are not who you think we are, because when God told Abraham, you go out there and look at the stars, and you can't count the number of children you're going to have. And the Jews have never amounted to anything more than 13 million at the very most. But if Israel is still there, and if Israel has taken over the key spots, the key nations, the Western republics, yeah, Israel's still there, and Israel are the ones that are going to be attacked. I'm going to leave you with that for right now. I'm sort of having fun doing this kind of a thing. You see my nice house here, it's almost a ski lodge, and God provides that for me. So you're having a problem with God or his son, back off. And Christ said, there's no man cometh to God except through me. So get out your notepad and you read what Christ had to say, and you start to believe it. And if you don't, ask him for the faith to believe it. That's your only way around it, because it says the mind of man is desperately wicked. Who could know it? Solomon said that. So think of yourself as desperately wicked. You will get yourself into trouble, even if you think you're doing the right thing. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I'll see you next time. I hope God keeps us alive, keeps us learning, and he trains us to please him so that we can be a part of this next iteration about after Christ returns, the millennium. What's the millennium all about? What happens after the millennium? What's supposed to happen on Judgment Day? How can you judge that? Well, he told the apostles, no, you're not, that you're going to judge angels. Hell, I don't want to judge an angel. I don't know what the guy was up against. But he told you that. So we're going to be doing a lot of judging, and if you're not a judgmental type, then I'm sure God has some other job for you. You can investigate the why grass grows or something like that. All right, I'll see you next time. It's good chatting with you. Shalom.